In this video, we're going to be talking about graphing a hyperbola when we're given its general form. The first step we want to take is to change from its general form to its standard form by completing the squares. So to do that, I want to group my x's together, and I want to group my y's together. The first thing I notice is that my x squared has a negative coefficient, while my y squared has a positive coefficient. So I'm going to put my y's first. So I have 9y squared minus 72y minus 16x squared plus 64x. Here I've pulled the negative out of the negative 16x squared and the negative 64x. And then I still have negative 64 equals 0. So next, I'm going to see if there's anything I can factor out of these groupings, because I want my x and y to eventually have coefficients of 1. So here I have 9y squared minus 72y. I can pull a 9 out of this and have y squared minus 8y. And here I have 16x squared plus 64x. I can pull out a 16, and I have x squared plus 4x. And I'm going to go ahead and move this 64 over to the other side. So I'm going to add 64 to both sides. So I get 64. So next I want to work on completing the squares. So here I have 9 times y squared minus 8y, and I need to figure out what this third term is. So to do that, I'm going to take half of this negative 8, and then I'm going to square it. So half of negative 8 is negative 4. Square that, you get positive 16. But I can't just add this 16 in randomly. So I'm going to figure out what exactly I've added into the equation and then balance it by subtracting it. So 9 times 16 is positive 144, so I need to subtract 144. Next, I move on to my x's. I have negative 16 times x squared plus 4x, and I need to figure out what my third term will be. So I take half of 4, which gives me 2, and I square it to be 4. So here I've got a negative 16 multiplied by a positive 4, so I'm subtracting out 64, so I need to add 64 to balance it. And that equals 64. So next I want to simplify these. So here I will have 9 times y minus 4 squared. And then I'm going to move all of these to the other side in just a second. So then I'll have negative 16x plus 2 squared equals, when I add this 144 across and I subtract this 64 across, I get 144 on the other side. So now divide by 144 because hyperbolas need one side to equal 1. So here I get 9 over 144. This cancels and I get 16. So I get y minus 4 squared over 16 minus this 16 and this 144 become 9. So I get x plus 2 squared over 9 equals 1. So now I'm in standard form. Let's look at the difference between a hyperbola with a horizontal transverse axis and a vertical transverse axis. And then we can classify what we have here and move forward from there with our example. So if we have a horizontal transverse axis, the standard form is x minus h squared over a squared minus y minus k squared over b squared equals 1, with center h comma k, vertices h plus or minus a comma k, foci h plus or minus c comma k, where c squared equals a squared plus b squared, transverse axis y equals k, and asymptotes y equals plus or minus b over a times x minus h plus k. If we have a vertical transverse axis, our standard form becomes y minus k squared over a squared minus x minus h squared over b squared equals 1. Our center is h comma k, our vertices are h comma k plus or minus a, our foci are h comma k plus or minus c, where c squared equals a squared plus b squared. Our transverse axis is x equals h, and our asymptotes are y equals plus or minus a over b times x minus h plus k. So let's look and see which one we have. Here we have a y term subtracting an x term. So that tells me that this has a vertical transverse axis. So our next step is we want to identify the center transverse axis AB and find C. So first let's start by copying down our equation. We have y minus 4 squared over 16 minus x plus 2 squared over 9 equals 1. So our center is going to be h comma k, which is going to be negative 2 comma 4. And this is because this in the form is x minus h, and we have a plus, so this becomes negative. Next, we want to find our transverse axis. So we know that our transverse axis is x equals h. So this is going to be x equals negative 2. Then we want to identify a. So here we know that a squared equals 16. So that means a is equal to 4 because a and b are always positive. B squared is equal to 9, so then b is equal to 3. And then to find c, we have c squared equals a squared, which is 16, plus b squared, which is 9. So c squared equals 25, so c equals 5. So we can use all of this information that we just found to find our vertices, foci, and asymptotes. So our vertices, let's start with that. Our vertices are going to be of the form h, comma, k plus or minus a, because we're dealing with a vertical transverse axis. So in that case, we have h, which is negative 2, and then we have 4 plus or minus a, which is 4. So we have negative 2, comma 8, and we have negative 2, comma 0. Next, let's see, and this was vertices. Next, let's look at our foci, which are h, comma, k plus or minus c. So that will be negative 2, comma, 4 plus or minus 5. So that'll give me negative 2, comma, 9, and negative 2, comma, negative 1. And then lastly, let's find our asymptotes. So we have y equals, this is vertical, so it's going to be this formula, plus or minus a over b times x minus h plus k. So we're going to have y equals plus or minus 4 over 3 x minus negative 2 plus k, which is 4. So we'll have y equals plus or minus 4/3 x plus 2 plus 4. So let's talk about how we graph this. If we're doing a paper graph, all of this will be necessary. But if you're graphing in Alex, things are a little bit easier. For that, you need to know your center, which we found here, which is negative 2, 4. You need to know one of your vertices, and you need to know a point on one of your asymptotes. So here, our center is going to be negative 2, positive 4. One of our vertices is negative 2, 8. And a point on our asymptote. We go to our center, and then we can use the slope from our asymptote to find the next point. So if we do this, we can go up 4 and over 3 to find that. And now we have the graph of a hyperbola.